What's the most dedicated case of the long con you've ever witnessed? Don't know if an accidental one counts, but my so had a boss who was always pulling pranks, so one day he decided to retaliate. He got one of those cheap but persistent key finders that chirps when you whistle and placed it in the headrest upholstery of the boss's truck. 5 years later we were at company Christmas party and the boss and his wife are dragging out all the old pranks. So tells boss what he had done. Boss's wife freaks out and yells told you so. Turns out boss is mostly deaf in one ear and never once heard the chirping. Wife however kept hearing the sound and was losing her mind. They would turn down the radio to listen for it and there would be no sound. Turn it up and the chirping would start again. He was so sick of hearing her complain about it that he sold his truck. No more problems. He sold his truck. Pretty sure my so won. Thankfully it was long enough after he sold it that he wasn't mad. The poor buyer. OMG. The gnome conspiracy. Friend of ours found a weird garden gnome in her backyard, and it seemed to be pointing at her. She didn't put it there, and when we showed up for a barbecue, we found it right where she saw it. She was oddly afraid to touch it, but we all said it was obviously just some kids pranking her. It disappeared the next day. Few weeks later she saw a gnome just like it on her way to work. She even took a picture of it and I have to admit, it was pretty similar. She left it be and thought nothing of it until she saw another near the house of a friend of ours, and once or twice more in town. She saw another one outside a B&B in Edinburgh that we recommended, then in a hedge in Provence. Then she saw it in the background of a picture we all took in Vegas on our last day there, near the pool at the Mandalay Bay. We all agreed it did look similar, but we assured her it must simply be a popular model. I mean, it can't possibly be the same gnome. It's the same gnome. The owner of the B&B in Scotland is an old friend of ours, and he got it in the mail 2 days before she arrived. I positioned it on the side of the road several times, but she only saw it once or twice. I think she was beginning to suspect me, so when it showed up at our friend's neighbor's house, I was conspicuously out of the country. She actually accused me of doing this, but I just laughed and said A, I was on a different continent, and B, it couldn't possibly be the same gnome. If it was, there'd have to be dozens of people involved in some sort of conspiracy. That's actually pretty accurate, including several of her sisters and most of her friends. Oh, and it's been going on for 11 years now. The gnome is actually in the background of several more of her vacation shots, most recently in a coffee house in Seattle. I have a friend there and they met for coffee, and the gnome was there. She hasn't spotted it yet in the met your friend picture they sent me, but she will, and when she does, we'll all poo-poo it. Pretty sure she isn't on Reddit. Hate to blow this after so long. Holy crap, this is brilliant. Whenever you decide to end it, the finale should be having it show up somewhere she never goes in her house, like deep within the basement. When my brother started college, someone told him about a local bar that gave a free keg to anyone that brought in a 5-gallon bucket full of soda tabs. After 3 years of collecting tabs, he hauls this heavy bucket down to this bar and asks for his free keg. They look at him like he's nuts and tell him they have never done that. This just makes me sad. Not specifically a con, but I worked with a guy who had a pickup truck and one day found an entire bag of household trash in the back of his truck. He went through the bag of trash and found an envelope with an address. Now, rather than returning the trash, he took the address and signed the person up for every conceivable piece of junk mail for years. Any kind of offer this guy got, he filled it out with that address and sent it his way. That's some dedication. Hopefully it was the right address. When I was a kid, 4th grade, brother 6th grade, my brother and I were on vacation in Massachusetts. We ate ice cream at a local restaurant, and as we were all piling in the car, my brother goes to the bathroom. When he jumps in the car, he tells me about the amazing bathroom that had heated toilet seats, foaming hand soap, and everything automated. I wanted to jump out to check, but my dad said we had to go. For the next 5 years, occasionally the ice cream restaurant would pop up in a conversation and my brother would remind me about the bathroom. It got so far as we would call it the ice cream place with a good bathroom. Finally, 5 years after the original incident, when I was in 8th grade, we went back to Massachusetts. I convinced my family to go there just because I wanted to see the bathroom. We get there and in my youthful exuberance I run into the bathroom to see just a bathroom. Frick my brother. This is pretty much every bathroom in Japan. The heated toilet seats are amazing. If I recall correctly, the serial killer Ted Bundy got dumped by his girlfriend when he was younger, so he spent years becoming the exact person she wanted him to be, made her fall completely in love with him, and then he just broke her heart, simply for revenge for her dumping him all those years ago. That's dedication. He also killed over 30 people who wore their hair like hers, so there's that. Probably too late for this, but in my office there's 6 of us with cubicle-like setups, formed by each other's desks. They have high shelves, which are the walls. 3 of us decided that as a practical joke, we would slowly move the 2 desks that formed our co-workers' walls an inch and a half closer every week. For almost 4 months we moved those desks every Monday morning, an inch and a half at a time. The guy was already in the corner of the office, but he became noticeably more irritable, and at one point even said that he felt like the walls were closing in on him. I nearly choked myself to death trying not to laugh out loud. Anyway, he eventually found out when he could no longer fit his weekly case of water between his desk and the wall. To his credit, he was a good sport about it, and we all had a good laugh. When my first kid was born, I was concerned that if she tickled me, I might hurt her when I jumped or jerked, so I decided to convince her that I was only ticklish on the tip of my index finger. This was incredibly successful and she believed it completely. When her brother was born 6 years later, I continued the ruse. 4 years later, I remarried and I helped convince my new stepdaughter that the end of my index finger was indeed my only ticklish spot, and once again I was safe. All through their teenage years and early 20s, I continued the story. They would even explain to their friends how totally weird I was, being only ticklish on my index finger. Then one day, some 25 years after it all began and all my children grown and in their 20s, I came clean. They refused to believe me for a long time, but it finally dawned on them that I was indeed the king of the long con. They are on Reddit and might be able to confirm if they see this post. I think this is the real con right here. Come up with a suitable story that you actually did to your children, and then post it on Reddit so as to coax a response and find out the names of their accounts. The guy who, in EVE Online, infiltrated a rival corporation over a period of more than a year, becoming its CEO, to end up fricking it over hardcore. EVE's complexity is freaking scary, man. I know every MMO has its own economy, but the sheer scale the EVE society reaches is mind-blowing. A friend of mine faked an English accent to get with a woman, and eventually to keep getting with her, for almost 5 months. He stumbled when she called him early one morning before he had woken up and didn't realize it was her. The days before caller had kids, he tried to save himself with "I dreamed I was eating one of your greasy American cheeseburgers, but it was too late." That seems so difficult, but perhaps worth it. When my friend was 17, she went on an exchange trip to Austria. While with 2 friends and in a burst of high spirits, alcohol plus a dare, she walked across a car roof. 2 months after she returned to the US, she received a letter from Austrian police issuing an arrest warrant for damaging cars. She became hysterical and showed her parents, who grounded her for a year but also engaged a lawyer to help fight the charges. The lawyer sorted it out with the Austrian police force and all charges were dropped. The lawyer charged the family over $3,000. 10 years later, her 2 friends admitted to me that they had written the letter as a prank but got too scared to say anything once the lawyer got involved. I want to know more about the lawyer who told them he got all these imaginary charges dropped. A friend of mine was sent out to the store by his wife to buy some Christmas greeting cards. When he returned home, his wife said that they were awful and to go return them and buy something different. He returned to the store and bought different ones but kept the old ones. The next October he sent one of those cards blank to everyone on his Christmas card list, telling them he was pranking his wife and to put their holiday wishes on the card he enclosed. Come December, all these cards start rolling in with cryptic messages in them referring to the design on the card. The mantelpiece is covered with these cards. She doesn't catch on and says that she thinks they are lovely, but what an odd coincidence that they are all the same. He finally breaks down and tells her it was a pretty frosty Christmas that year. I'm pretty sure my whole life is a scam by my parents, so I'll pay for their nursing home. Haha, joke's on you. I became a teacher. I'll never make enough money to put you in a good home. My daughter the broke social worker keeps reassuring me, don't worry, you'll always have a bed in my homeless shelter, yay. So in my group of friends we have a buddy that is a crazy music snob. He had terabytes of music back in 2008, mainly because he refused to download MP3s, only going for lossless formats. He prides himself in being on the up and up of all the new underground stuff. So one of our more clever friends casually tosses out a reference to a group that he totally made up on the spot, and we all knew their entire catalog. We were all the biggest Guinea Pig Tribe fans. Our music snob friend took the bait, hook, line, and sinker. He scoured the internet searching for this fabled Guinea Pig Tribe. He tried to call us on it, stating they didn't exist. We said he wasn't searching hard enough. One of us produced a track and played it for him. He continued his search. Dude got laughed out of dozens of underground music forums. Anytime we found out he couldn't go to a show we were all headed to, one of us would Photoshop GPT into the flyer. He would get so mad that he couldn't attend. This went on for a solid year. It all came to a head when he was lamenting once again that he was going to miss another performance by the most innovative music act the world has ever seen, when the friend that started it all, just as casually as it began, replied, "What are you talking about, dude? You're the one who introduced GPT to us," then sent him a photoshopped photo of all of us in a group, complete with him wearing a GPT shirt. He refused to talk to us for a solid month. Not calling you out, but the Photoshop picture be nice. My mother is a huge Chicago Cubs fan. She has stated numerous times that being a St. Louis Cardinals fan would have been an immediate deal breaker for anyone she dated when she was young. My dad is a huge St. Louis Cardinals fan, and he only revealed this fact the day after their 23rd anniversary. She's been annoyed with him for over a year now. New guy at work was told I was a Jehovah's Witness and avoided me like the plague for 6 months. 2 years later still won't make eye contact with me. Maybe he just thinks you're ugly. My friend used to carry a bottle of Tabasco everywhere with him, kept it in his bag and put it on everything. For about a 3-month period, every chance we got we put a few drops of water in, so he thought he was getting accustomed and used more and more. Just before he finished the bottle we replaced it with the hottest hot sauce we could find and he lathered that crap on his lunch. Worth it. I'm a firefighter. Firefighters sometimes have too much time on their hands, so our jokes and pranks can reach epic levels. Years ago, I worked with a guy who was obsessed with his gas mileage. He wouldn't shut up about it, would give us updates every shift, was constantly reading ways to improve it. It was ridiculous. Eventually the rest of us hatched a plan. We brought in a few empty gas cans and a siphon pump. Every shift, we would siphon off some of the dude's gas and hide it in the shed out back. This went on for weeks. Gas man was going absolutely apeshit. He couldn't figure out what was going on. This was terrible. He has to run the numbers again to make sure it was really happening, etc. Eventually he took his car into his mechanic to see why his mileage had dropped so precipitously. He was practically tearing his hair out, going freaking crazy. Gas man descended into a funk. Finally, when we decided he had hit rock bottom, we launched phase 2. Every shift, we started taking some of the gas we had squirreled away and put it back into his car. Gas man lost his crap. He's suddenly getting insane gas mileage. He doesn't know whether to laugh or to cry. The numbers just don't add up, but it's like he's driving a magic car. And then after a few more weeks, we were out of gas, and just like that everything went back to normal. We kept our mouths shut, and from that day to this, Gasman has been telling the story of the great summer gas mileage mystery to anyone who will listen. When Gasman retires, we'll let him in on the caper, but not a day before. I swear I've read almost this exact story on Reddit a few years ago, but it was a guy who was a lowbie mechanic helper at a car dealership, and it was the other mechanics and crew there involved. Not to specifically call bulls on this story, but I am rather suspicious. For about 7 years now, I would call my friend from a blocked number, someone else's phone, or in recent years one of those fake phone apps, and I will make farting sounds into the phone. There's never telling when it'll be. There might be a 6-month interval between 2 calls, or it could be a couple weeks. Sometimes he'll hang right up and other times he'll interact with me and ask questions about how this mysterious farter is doing, and I'll make different pitches for him as if I'm speaking in fart. Not sure if I'll ever tell him. Gives me a good laugh when I do it. This is evil. I'd be scared shitless that there is some crazy stalker with vibes out to get me. Over the last 3 years, anytime I need to use an Allen wrench, I wait until my girlfriend is around and refer to it as a Sir Allen wrench, then drop in a tidbit about it being named for Sir Allen of Wales. I've only needed an Allen wrench like 5 times over 3 years, and she has yet to be in a situation, to my knowledge, where she needs one, but the day she does will be worth it. This is delightful and I'm stealing this. My friend is getting his PhD solely to force his father to call him doctor. Last name. He starts next year. No one else will have to call him that, just his father. There was a fellow in NYC in the early 1980s who typed up invoices for cleaning supplies and sent them to multiple business headquarters for payment. Since his invoices sounded reasonable in price, many just paid it, even though he was sending nothing. He did it for years and would have kept going, but had the bad luck of sending a bill to an accountant who checked on a double entry system and announced the scam. Another flavor of this is to send invoices that say in tiny, odd font text not an invoice but rather an offer for stuff businesses buy. Some guy in accounts payable signs off on it, and they've bought several $1,000s worth of questionable quality toner cartridges for printers they don't own. If my dad mentions a song title in a conversation with my mom, she will pretend not to know what song he is talking about to the point where he will start to sing nearly the entire song. She always knows the song he's talking about but she thinks it's hilarious. She's been doing this for 32 years and still hasn't told him. If you ask my in-laws, it was me moving in with their son in his trailer in the middle of the woods 5 years ago. I'm still waiting for that gold they think I'm digging from him. My older uncle always used to torment my younger uncle when they were kids. Not in like the normal way, but serious psychological torment. The one that comes to mind was when my younger uncle was about 8. The older one spent 3 months peppering in stories of a monster in the neighborhood. Even began an urban legend in his school about this crap. My younger uncle was scared shitless of it. He wouldn't go out to hunt. His favorite thing. Because of it as well. This whole thing kept going for around 3-4 months. Ultimately culminate in the older one hiding outside the younger one's window with a mask on and tapping on the glass for about an hour while he screamed inside. Probably too late for this, but I heard this to my father's friend. He worked in a hotel's accounts department, so apparently one employee, Mr. from the kitchen depth, would go about talking how he invests his money and earns about 12% interest. So a few people gave him money to invest and he did deliver. Soon word spread and he had like 200 plus investors in his scheme. And you have to realize that he handled these investments for more than 12 years and delivered. Even the hotel's employee union gave him a huge chunk to invest. So things were quite good when one day this guy clocks out of work as usual. Then after that he stops answering calls. He stops showing up to work. Agitated with this fact, lot of employees went to his address. They were shocked to know that the guy had sold his house to someone. Then imagine their reactions when they realized that the day he clocked out the last time, he went from work to the airport and he and his family left the country. He took around $700,000 with him. One of my current co-worker worked at this hotel and asked him about it and he confirmed it too. I know a guy who said he had been earning a 10% return consistently in like 2005, and it was easy as cake and risk-free and no commitment, because he had a guy. It was more than likely Bernie Madoff. Nobody was earning 10% on short term with no risk in 2005. I have a friend who has a Middle Eastern father and a Scottish mother. We're in the UK. He told a couple of dumb people in our class at college that he was a practicing Jew. He then told everyone at his new work the next year, as well as everyone at his university when he left home, just because he found it funny to mislead people who can't see through his lie. He is now a couple of years deep into a ridiculous lie with seemingly no way out, and no good reason for why he'd ever lie about such a thing to explain to most of the people he sees day to day. There was a guy in Bristol, UK, who pretended to be a parking ticket man in the car park of a zoo. He'd go up to cars and ask for £1 and give the driver a ticket. He did this for 20 years. The zoo assumed he was with the council and the council assumed he was with the zoo. After 20 years he just disappeared and only then did the zoo and council realize he was just conning everyone. He left with what was probably millions and got away with it. That's not a robbery, that's a career. A guy I dated. We met 20 years ago. Kids were in kindergarten together. We hired him to build an addition. He misappropriated $20,000. We sued him. Won in mediation. My long-term relationship spilt and his marriage ended. He and I met again 10 years later. We dated. Had him to do work on my house again. He scammed me out of $10,000. Said it was payback. He disappeared. TLDR. I'm an idiot. Someone named Peter Dubes enrolled in my university and college, on-campus accommodation chapter house, but never showed up. Other students did his assignments and sat his exams for him, sharing the workload around. They even paid his fees. Apparently they got him all the way to graduation before the uni realized what was going on. Or at least, that's the rumor. What we do know is that his name has been used as a prankster pseudonym for decades. Dubes did it was our I know nothing. I overheard some members of the class of 1960 something reunion laughing about the pranks that had blamed on Dubes. We couldn't believe it went back that far, so we asked them a few questions. Apparently Dubes began decades before they came to the college. Who started the Dubes con? Maybe we'll never know. Maybe Dubes did it. My great-grandfather was Ukrainian. Before my grandmother's sister was born he argued with my great-grandmother about the name. He wanted a Ukrainian name and she wanted something more English. Eventually he gave in. When she was born my great-grandfather went and registered her name while they were at the hospital. When he came back and he told my great-grandmother that he had registered her name as Agnes just like they had agreed. Fast forward a lifetime. When she hit her 80s Agnes needed her birth certificate for some sort of social security thing, as she had never been given it by her father, and being born in Canada in the early 1900s a lot of that stuff wasn't as important back then. So she sent in the forms to get the Canadian government to reissue her birth certificate. When it finally came the actual first name on it was Anishka. No one in the family except for my great-grandfather had ever known this until this point, and he had died many years before so she couldn't even confront him about it. He had taken the secret right to his grave. If that's not a long con I don't know what is. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.